Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Masters, and hello to Kimberly and also to Linda. We have Jordana Robinson here with us today, and I'm very excited to introduce her in just a little bit, but I have a few announcements that I want to make. Mark your calendar for January 26th. We're going to have a session on utilizing podcasting and learning. So you'll receive an invitation to that. And then also, let's see here, we want you to know about the upcoming annual conference. I received an email that registration is open for Spokane, Washington. If you have never been to Spokane, it is just one of the most beautiful cities. I've traveled all over the U.S., and I just remember going to Spokane, and it was just such an amazing city with a river running through it and falls right there. And it's close to Idaho and Coeur d'Alene on the western side of Washington. So hopefully you can join us June 24th through the 26th next year in Spokane. So that would be really great. Also, we don't assume that people know how to use the GoToWebinar tool, so I just go through real quickly the panel. And on the right-hand side, if you're using a PC, you might see a little orange arrow that opens and closes the control panel. And you can control your audio by using mic and speakers with a headset, or you could use the telephone. And I like to tell people to click the view menu at the top and uncheck this auto hide, and then it keeps this control panel open so that you can use that question box. If you're having trouble with the VoIP, uh, you can switch to the telephone by just pressing the radial button, and but when you dial in the phone number and the access code, make sure you put in that 2-digit PIN, because that's what allows me to unmute you if you want to ask questions or contribute to the conversation. We try to make this very interactive. And then there's the question box. That's where you're going to enter your comments. We might do some open-ended poll questions where you'd enter your answer there. We also have another poll question. And then make sure you download the handout that's also in the control panel. You just click on the file and download it. And then the little raise hand button here on the left-hand side of your control panel, we might use that for quick polls as well. So we want to welcome you. If you're a member, great. If you're a guest here, we hope you'll come back and maybe join Site. We want you to consider ways you can get involved with Site, whether it's by joining as a member, or if you're already a member, finding a way to grow more by getting involved. So Site has unlimited benefits of membership, and as you can see on the screen, we would love you to get connected today. Site's a great place to network with people in a similar role as yours, and professional networking has a way of becoming a great tool when you least expect it. So the relationships you sow today may yield success in the future. And you can visit our website, that's at the bottom of the screen, insurancetrainers.org, and get membership information and contacts if you have any questions. And we hope you will join us. And now it's my pleasure to turn control over to Jordana Robinson from Great American Insurance Company. And we're so excited to have her to speak to us about becoming an adjuster CE provider. So welcome, Jordana.
Good morning. Thanks, Sandy. I appreciate that introduction. And I thank all of you for lending me a little bit of time today. I'm a little hoarse. I apologize for that. Just getting over a cold. But what I'd like to do, and Sandra, I think you're going to display some polling questions just to give me a better idea of our audience today and what area of insurance you work in. I'm not going to assume everyone's in training, but I'm kind of assuming that.
Yeah, and if you mark other, type into the question box what other is for you, and I'll be able to share your answer with Jordana. So, and the question box is in your control panel, so if it's collapsed, just hit the little orange arrow to open up the control panel. So let's see if we can get everyone to vote and weigh in. We've got a couple more people that need to weigh in, so just click on the radial button on the screen. Are you in claims, underwriting, agency, or other? Last chance to weigh in. All right, we got everyone to weigh in. I'll close the poll, share the results, and look at that. Everyone's in claims. How's
All
that?
right, that's perfect. That's great. Well, we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so discussing how to become an adjuster CE provider. As trainers, we always have our objectives. This is no surprise. We're going to provide a framework to assess your organization's need and readiness to become an adjuster CE provider, demonstrate an approach to becoming an adjuster CE provider, and then what we'll also do is examine the responsibilities, there are a lot of them, involved in offering and maintaining adjuster CE courses. Now, this first bullet point, definitely really important, because I want to tell you, after this session, you might come to the conclusion that your organization may not have a need to become a provider of adjuster CE. So to help you determine that, there should be an attachment, I think Sandra mentioned that you can download. You can jot down certain points or consolidate your thoughts to kind of complete an informal needs analysis. So we'll just jump right in. I want to begin with some need-to-know facts. So we're just going to boil down adjuster licensing. First of all, there are 15 states that require non-resident staff adjuster licenses. Of those 15 states, 9 require non-resident staff adjuster continuing education, which you'll hear me refer to it as CE, just generally CE. I'll use the acronym. There are also what are known as appointment states, and there's 3 of them. Appointment states require an adjuster be sponsored by an approved entity, which in our case, the adjuster, it's the insurance carrier employer. And I'm not going to get into this. That could actually be another session, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Something to point out. So now we'll get into terms to know. At this point, we talked about the states that require adjuster licensing and those that require CE. Now I want to go over terms that you're probably familiar with. If not, if you're going to be an adjuster CE provider, you definitely want to become familiar with these terms. So here, knowing your adjusting staff is a key asset when considering whether or not to become an adjuster CE provider. There are several types of adjusters. We're all in claims here, so I know that you guys are really familiar with these terms, so I'm not going to read them to you, but definitely commonly seen when you talk about adjuster licensing in CE. Some other terms to know. Let's talk about the types of states. When you're assessing adjuster licensing and CE requirements from the different state DOIs, Department of Insurance, of course, you will come across these terms of the different types of states. So you've got your home state, resident state, they call it the DHS state, your designated home state, and CE state. Those are all explained on Department of Insurance websites. And we still have some more terms, so I'm not done yet. There are also different types of CE credit you can apply for when seeking course approval. We're not there yet in our discussion of seeking course approval, but I think this is a really good time to let you know the importance of ensuring you select the right type of CE credit. And I'm going to share my one experience a couple of years ago when I learned this the hard way. We had a vendor who stated a course was approved for adjuster CE when in fact it was approved for producer or agent CE. I have to tell you, it was not fun telling attendees 2 hours of CE could not be granted to them. So I wanted to share that with you, definitely something to be aware of. So now that we've introduced these terms, we're going to delve into some of the considerations. And I say some of the considerations because I don't believe this is an exhaustive list, and there may be things that you think of for your organization, but I do want to go over some basic considerations involved in determining whether or not your organization wants to become an adjuster CE provider or take a pass on it. Again, you've got that sheet where you can jot down your thoughts as we go through this. So first, you want to know, and you need to take a look at your organization. What does it look like? You know, are you a national or regional writer? And it's the difference between writing in all 50 states versus a handful, right? Well, regardless of whether your organization is a national or regional writer, remember, you just saw that adjuster licensing is not required in all 50 states. In fact, your organization may not even write in a state that requires adjuster CE. So got that answered right there. Second consideration, where's your adjuster staff located? Is it centralized in the corporate headquarters? Do you have regional offices? Or do the majority of your adjusters Do they work remotely in the comfort of their own homes? Or perhaps you have a mix of it. At Great American, we have a mix of it. And this is important because you want to know, are you just going to be providing live classroom training, or do you need to provide remote training opportunities? So via webinar like we're doing today, or video teleconferencing. So that's important. Number 3, does your organization already provide adjuster CE opportunities? Do you use CE providers? At CITE's annual conference, we're exposed to a lot of great CE providers. And at Great American here, we actually use some of them. For example, Kaplan, we're a great consumer of the institutes. Law firms, though, can be another CE provider resource. So then when you answer this, the question then becomes, does your organization really need to become an adjuster CE provider? You might determine that perhaps offering CE opportunities through a CE provider is an appropriate fit for your organization. It's a hard stop. You don't need to become an adjuster CE provider. But let's move on. Let's talk about content. Do you already have content? Do you have staff to create the content that you want to deliver? Another thing to consider is, does your organization want to own and have control of the content? I can tell you at Great American, we create a lot of our own content because we like playing a major role in the educational content our claim staff receives. And we really find that it lends itself to consistency and messaging really, within the skill development. However, I will say we also use vendors. We approved a course of Carl Van's, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with Carl Van. He's with the International Institute. He's delivered to us throughout the years a negotiation course. But in doing that, we've also reassigned CE provider rights back to a vendor that we used. So it can be the reverse. There are, and I mentioned this before, a lot of responsibilities involved in being an adjuster CE provider. So we've got some compliance things that I'll talk about. But because of this, because of all these responsibilities, you really need to determine if you're adequately staffed. That's a big consideration. Now, I want to talk about, what about the cost? What will it cost your organization to be a CE provider of adjuster CE? I'm going to share with you, and you see on the screen here, there are fees for filing a course for CE, and then the subsequent line item expenses, there's filing fees per hour of CE. But before I apply these figures to an example, I just want to ask, and you can put this in the chat feature, your answer, but what do you think is the most expensive part of CE for me at Great American? What's the most expensive part?
That's good. A good question. Go ahead and enter into the question box. So Kimberly says the time spent developing the course. Anyone else?
That is indeed true. And who's doing that? Who's creating that course? Your trainers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the trainers are actually, at least here, in charge of managing the CE process. So the answer is, and Kimberly, you are on the right track, and really you spoke to it, it's me. I'm the most expensive part of managing the CE process. I will tell you about 15 to 20% of my time is actually spent managing the CE. So while I work with Mary Bruggeman to create original course content, I file the CE and manage the process. So let's get into this cost on, filing it and the credit hours. I'm going to take this example. So we'll see here, we have Texas and New Hampshire. We'll go on here. Let's say for a 5-hour Texas and New Hampshire CE approved course delivered on one date to 36 people, the grand total is $376. But again, that doesn't account for a full-time or part-time employee, that expense to manage all that. And Kim, you spoke to that. So you can see how that can add up. You look at that and determine, hey, is that an acceptable expense load? So if you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, it could be that you would simply be shifting the cost of CE from the outside to in-house. Could be that, who knows? But what we've done here is we've discussed 5 considerations. Again, I said this is not an exhaustive list. There could definitely be more that may be unique to your organization. But for the sake of this presentation, we're going to use the scenario where your organization has made the decision to become an adjuster CE provider. So let's talk about what those next steps are. I'm going to use Texas as our example throughout this process. So the first thing what you want to do, you've decided, hey, I'm going to be an adjuster CE provider. Identify the states where your organization would like to become that CE provider. Again, this goes back to knowing your organization and where the majority of your claim staff is licensed. I will tell you that CE provider numbers are assigned to the organization. They're not assigned to the individual CE contacts at the organization. So you want to make sure that you coordinate with the appropriate parties in your organization. In corporate claims training and development here at Great American, we had to coordinate with our crop division. So we are all under one CE provider number. And that's really important because you don't want to mess up that status. You want to make sure that you're in compliance and you're working under that same number and maintaining everything so that it's compliance ready. So next thing, number two, I should probably say number two here, access the Department of Insurance websites of the states your organization has identified. Each website looks different, and I know that you guys are aware of this, but you can locate instructions on how to become a CE provider in a particular state. You can find somewhere you can actually search to get to that page. The third thing is locate and complete the CE provider application. You'll note in Texas there's a $50 non-refundable application fee, and it needs to be paid by check, not money order or credit card. So take a look at that on the applications. Still going with Texas, you want to submit the completed application along with any associated fee by mail. That's in Texas, but of course, when you're trying to be a CE provider, you've got to apply. It's either online or you can mail the application. For the state of Texas, there is a 15 to 21 day turnaround time in processing CE provider applications. So for Texas, let's just say it takes roughly a month to know whether or not you'll be approved as a CE provider. Again, for purposes of today, Texas has accepted your CE provider application. So with that, I want to say congratulations. You're a CE provider. And that's wonderful. But again, we've got all those responsibilities, right? Remember that slide where I showed front-end tasks, back-end tasks, ongoing tasks, lots of responsibilities. So what we'll do now is I want to break out those responsibilities and group them into tasks to be done before a course is held, during, and then what is done after a course offering. So you've got the course content, but you need to get that approved for CE, right? Like I said a few minutes ago, that application has to be mailed, but to submit a course in Texas for CE approval, you have the option, again, you can send it by mail, but you can also submit it electronically via CIRCON, which I highly recommend. It's so easy, to do things electronically, and that's how I do it here. But I will tell you, in New Hampshire, it's a paper application that I have to fill out, which I type it, but I have to actually mail that, so it's a paper process.
Could you tell me the name of that organization again, CIRCON?
Yes, it's CIRCON. It's SIRCON.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Now, again, I've told you that I'm continuing with Texas. So this, what you see on the screen here, this is the application, the online application for a course in Texas. Make sure you select private or public offering during the submission process. And that's just not unique to Texas. You do want to make sure that you state if it's going to be open to maybe other carriers or if it's just going to be within your organization. Do give yourself, and I highly suggest this, at least a 60-day lead time to allow for the review and approval process of that particular course. And the reason I say that is that if the initial course submission is declined, and that can happen, it's happened, but with that 60 days, you have ample time to make revisions and resubmit. And the states are really good about doing that. They give you time to, make some revisions and resubmit. Texas, I will say, is very good about providing detail as to why a course was rejected. And again, they do allow you ample time to make those corrections. Now, there's my little reminder there, 60 days. And if you want to do more, I highly suggest that too, but 60 days at least. With Texas, seeking course approval isn't as simple as, hey, I complete the application, gave you the title, and I paid the fee. And I don't think it comes as a surprise that as a CE provider, you have to provide documentary support to explain your course. And in Texas, they want to know, how does it comply with the Texas Administrative Code 19.1006? So those are the guidelines. This is what the course documentation you submit is measured against in Texas in order for them to grant your CE approval for that course. So we're still in seeking course approval. The documents that need to be submitted, you need to submit your objectives, the course description, course outline, which is a timed outline, and then a course evaluation. Like I said, these documents can be submitted electronically through CIRCON, which I highly recommend. With other states, like Oklahoma, they may not request an evaluation, but they actually want the PowerPoint and any handouts you'll be distributing as part of their submission process, which they do it online through state-based systems, if you're familiar with that. So depends on the state on what they want, but the core things are, of course, objectives, description, and an outline. If the outline isn't requested to be timed, I suggest submitting a timed outline for the course. I just think it gives the, I guess, the approving panel a better idea of the time that you're spending on certain topics and gives them a better idea of the flow of the course. So once your course has been approved, you need to drum up interest to fill that class, right? And so that means advertising. What we do is we advertise with an Outlook solicitation first, 30 days in advance of the course. And that's where we get our registrants and we put them on the roster, you know how many people to expect. And then for compliance purposes, a sign-in sheet must be used and preserved. So it's got to be saved somewhere as confirmation of attendance to support granting those CE credits. We remind participants ahead of time and during the course to make sure they provide their adjuster license numbers before leaving the class if they wish to earn the CE. And that's really important due to the time-sensitive nature of filing the CE. I will explain that shortly. So when we get into the course evaluation, Texas provides a sample template for course evaluations. Some other states do as well. But you can create your own, but just make sure that it addresses the same questions and contains the same language, welcoming attendees to provide any comments the provider, instructor, or the State Department of Insurance should know to evaluate the course. I'll show you right here. This is a copy, or I shouldn't say a sample, it is actually an example of our evaluation form that we use. One thing to mention too is that it is imperative that the number of evaluations match the number of attendees who receive the CE credit. So we always tell our participants that they have to complete a course evaluation and it has to marry up to the number of people seeking CE credit. That's again for compliance purposes. And this is something for the course facilitator to remind the attendees, pardon me, before and after the presentation or the course. So at this time, during, you're holding the course offering, easy enough, but as a CE provider, I can't stress enough that there needs to be strict adherence to compliance requirements. You've heard me say compliance, compliance, compliance. Like I said, regarding the evaluations, you inform the attendees that they complete that course evaluation, submitted at the end of the session. We go all over that, over and over again through what we call, as trainers, our housekeeping items. We do that at the beginning and the end of the session, like I mentioned before. Something else that I want to point out is there should be a proctor to monitor attendance to the session, and I would say that I would do that for all courses to make sure that the attendees actually attend the allotted amount of time. That's part of compliance too. In Texas, 50 minutes is considered an hour. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring that attendance because that's important for them to actually be granted that CE. So filing the CE credits. I mentioned CIRCON and state-based systems. Those are actually two insurance regulatory tools where CE can be filed, and I'm on those sites quite often throughout the year. I think by now you probably have a feel for the time sensitivity for many of the activities involved in being an adjuster CE provider. Filing CE credits, it's no different. In Texas, CE has to be filed within 30 days of attending a course. But there's some states that don't allow that much time, like New Hampshire. They allow 15 days. So that's a really tight window to make sure that you get those CE credits filed. With Texas, the state of Texas automatically generates your CE certificates. With other states like Oklahoma, they actually provide a CE certificate template on their Department of Insurance website, where you can pull that up and complete the CE certificate for their records, for the attendees' records. There's all this stuff involved, like I said, all these responsibilities, front end, back end, during. So to manage this, with your courses, I really suggest having some type of diary system. And what I created was an Excel tracking mechanism, because you want to make sure with your course renewals that you stay in front of that responsibility rather than waiting for the Department of Insurance to send you the renewal notice. So again, I created an Excel spreadsheet. I titled it Course Approvals Expirations Tracker. And I titled it that because that's where I record new courses. So if I'm submitting a course to Texas, I record that as far as to what the course title, the instructor, the state I'm filing it in, and I have a place for the initial approval date. I make comments on the right-hand side as far as when did I electronically submit that application. Once it's been approved for CE, then I put in the initial approval date, and then I set a rule date so that I am ahead of that initial notice coming to me. Again, it's something that I think you always want to be in front of, so that when you get that renewal notice saying, hey, this course is up for renewal, you've already taken care of it and you're moving on to that next month. In Texas, as far as, let's say it's been 2 years, most of the courses are approved for 2 years of CE, but in that time, let's say you've made some changes to the course. If it's more than 25%, if the course is modified more than 25%, then you have to submit a new course submission. That's important. So you can't just go under the old course number. You would have to submit a new course application. Now, for additional adjuster licensing and CE resources, there are a lot of free resources, such as, and I think you're in claims, you know about NIPR, National Insurance Producer Registry, and then CIRCON. There are also company member resources. I know you guys are familiar with Property Casualty Insurers, PCI, and AIA, American Insurance Association. So with that, I want to open it up for any questions you may have.
All right, so go ahead and use your question box and type in your question, or you could raise your hand and I can unmute your line if you have a detailed comment or a question you'd like to ask. One of the things that I was thinking about, Jordana, as you were speaking, do you see the number of states considering requiring adjuster CE growing, staying the same? What's the status there? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. From my experience and what I've seen, I don't see a lot of states requiring CE. I've actually seen over the last probably 7 years a reduction in the CE requirements. Many recall that with Texas, it used to be 30 CE requirements within a two-year period, and now it's down to 24. But I will say there are states that are requiring an ethics requirement if they didn't have that before.
I see. All right.
That's what I've seen. How about anybody else?
So Mirage is asking, have the adjusters noticed patterns? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Do you understand that question?
Patterns.
Okay. If someone complains of injury in worksite in 2011, did the adjuster notice patterns? 2005, 2002, 1999. So we're actually talking about becoming a provider for Adjuster CE. So I'm not sure how
Right, I'm
that
not.
question. Yeah, that question is not really related to our topic. I apologize. We're talking about becoming a provider for Adjuster CE. So, yep. All right. Any other questions? All right.
Well, Sandra, and to the group, I just want to say, if you have any questions, please, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. I'd be more than happy to speak with you further on my experience with managing the process and how to become an Adjuster CE provider.
Very good. Thank you so much. And Kimberly says this was helpful to our team, especially from the cost perspective. I think a lot of people underestimate the costs that are involved in becoming a provider and then providing the courses and those hourly fees. So thanks for putting together a detailed example on that. All right. Hope you
Good.
can join us next month for another site webinar. And you guys have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you next year. Thanks again, Jordana.